Welcome to On the Vineyard, a weekly podcast from the Vineyard Gazette Media Group on Martha's Vineyard. I'm senior writer Louisa Huffstatter, sitting in for your regular host, publisher Monica Brady-Myeroff. On the Vineyard is sponsored by Crane Appliance. In the newspaper this week and on our website, the Edgartown Board of Health has shut down an overcrowded house with 15 beds in 5 bedrooms. A homeless encampment with about 6 tents in Vineyard Haven was vacated after police asked residents to move on, and a new bill at the State House could bring big changes to the island's barrier beaches. We'll have more on that from the Vineyard Gazette newsroom in a moment. Our collegiate baseball team, the Martha's Vineyard Sharks, start playoffs August 1st at the Shark Tank in Oak Bluffs, facing the Vermont Mountaineers. Go Sharks! The sound of our historic press means it's time to check in with Editor-in-Chief Bill Evell, who has just wrapped up this week's issue.
Turning now to Ethan Genter for a very complex story that involves shifting sands and the governor's office. Ethan?
So last month, Governor Maura Healey filed a bill. It's a $3 billion environmental bond bill looking at all kinds of ranges of things. And tucked in there about halfway down is about 2 paragraphs that have to do with barrier beaches along Great Ponds, which we have a lot. And it has to do with kind of the ownership of those and kind of how it shifts when the sand moves itself.
So literally a shifting story, could have a lot of reverberations here on the Vineyard and elsewhere, as they were talking about. And there's also a little pushback about why she may have put this in the bill.
So she has said that she wants to do this bill to increase public access to barrier beaches. So what this bill would do is it kind of defines when a beach is public property. Here in Massachusetts, beaches are often private property. Our South Shore especially is kind of cut up into hundreds of parcels. And when that sand moves into a great pond, which are those ponds, Edgartown, Tisbury, Chilmark Pond, we have 17 in all, that abut the barrier beaches. When that sand gets pushed into the pond, that becomes the property of the state at that point, because states own the Great Ponds. And what the state is proposing is once that land goes into the Great Pond, even if it comes out again at some point, it's still the state's land. In the past, that has basically kind of been finders keepers. If it ends up on your property, that's your sand now. If it ends up on somebody else's and shifts away, it's been theirs. So it's kind of this very complicated situation. As you can imagine, this sand is always shifting on our South Shore.
So the fact that then the state would own it if it comes into the Great Pond, so what does that mean for folks who are behind pushing this bill, perhaps?
The governor's proposal is very similar to something that's been pushed by Richard Friedman. He has a house on Oyster Pond in Edgartown, and he's been in a fight with his neighbors and kind of had several appeals with different courts arguing that he has rights to beachfront property in Edgartown. He lives on the Great Pond. His neighbors have the beach. He claims it's his beach. And so in the journey of his, it's been almost 2 decades now, he's been fighting about this. He said, well, what if the beach was actually public and belonged to the state? So it's piqued some people's interest that this is kind of something coming from the governor's office. He is a big donor to the governor. Lots of Democratic candidates over the years. He's hosted the Clintons at this same estate that we're talking about. So a lot of people are kind of worried about, is this really about public access, or are there other intentions?
I'm going to sort of unpack that a bit. So the sand goes in there and then could be the ward of the state, which he's pushing for, but does that help him at all? How does that help him?
The idea is if this beach at some point moves into the pond and then comes back out again onto what is his property, that is now his beach, or he can access, even if it's not, he can access that land, he can access that beach, because even if it's been historically somebody else's, he would now be able to get to it.
So it goes from somebody else's to the state and then back to him, sort of thing. It's a lot of movement out there.
Yeah, it could be. And this has got a lot of people, real estate attorneys have kind of been looking at it and saying, does this constitute a taking similar to eminent domain, which you have to give fair compensation for in Massachusetts? Real estate people are kind of looking at, am I going to have to redraw all the lines on the homes I'm selling on these kind of properties? And people in town government are probably going to have to eventually look at it, because this is all taxable land right now, usually pretty highly taxed land. So what does that do to town coffers if all of a sudden a lot of this South Shore becomes state property?
Wow, a lot of avenues to this story. Thanks so much for breaking it down, and we will continue to follow it.
Thank you, Bill.
Turning now to Katrina Liu, who has a story that's been many years in the making. Doug McConnell, an open water swimmer, has been trying to swim from Nantucket to Martha's Vineyard to raise money for ALS. He's tried to do it alone 3 times and failed because the currents are so difficult. No one's actually made this journey before. But this year, he turned to a lot of different vineyarders that he's met over the years who've been part of his support team. And Katrina, how did he do?
He and 8 other swimmers did the relay and ended up completing the swim from Nantucket to Martha's Vineyard on Tuesday.
This is an 18-mile swim with crazy currents. They set out before dawn, and you were actually assigned to greet them as they left the island, correct?
Yes, I was. They started in Vineyard Haven at Owen Park at around 4:30 a.m. is when they all gathered, and then set off by boat to Nantucket before starting the swim from Nantucket at around 8 a.m.
Because you met them at the end of the day, what did you hear from them about the conditions and how it went? Did they meet any sharks or jellyfish or anything like that?
So good news, no wildlife were encountered, but the only hard part of the day was the beginning. Apparently, they all said that the waters in the morning, the first hour, were pretty choppy, but after that, it was smooth sailing.
Yeah, it's amazing because in previous years, Doug has encountered a ton of jellyfish. They stung him all over. And then because of the way the currents go, if you don't sort of hit around Cape Hogue at a certain time, you're washed out to sea. But this year, everything worked perfectly.
Yeah, I spoke to Doug afterwards. They had a little after party at Noman's to celebrate, and he said that the navigational crew just seemed to strike everything at the perfect moment, so everything just fell into place and made the swim possible.
We've been following this for many years, and Doug is a great guy, a seasonal vineyarder, and he's not just some guy who jumps in the water and tries to swim far. He's done a huge amount of these long swims, the English Channel, Tampa Bay, around the island of Manhattan, so he really knows his stuff, but turning then to a support team to complete the race. And this year they were raising money for ALS and also a local charity, right?
Yes, they're also raising money for the YMCA on the Vineyard for kids to get swim lessons because it's really important to have those, especially when you live on an island.
Super cool. All of these experienced swimmers starting the next generation out, making sure they can know how to swim. Well, thank you so much, Katrina, and congratulations to all of the swimmers out there. Really, really great job.
Thanks, Bill.
You can find out more about these stories and all the island news in this week's Vineyard Gazette and on our website, which is free at vineyardgazette.com. Sign up for our e-newsletters, The Broadsheet and Island Time, and we'll deliver our award-winning coverage and our best bets on things to do directly to your inbox. One last news note for the week. As of August 1st, it will cost 12% more to bring vehicles to Chappaquiddick aboard the Chappie Ferry. Passenger tickets will stay at $5, but motor vehicles are going up to $17 and bicycle fares are going to be $8. The return trip is always free. Speaking of ferry tickets, we found a funny story in the Martha's Vineyard Museum Oral History Collection. This is Jocelyn Coleman Walton with some summer shenanigans from days gone by.
Granny loved to drive. Her father taught her how to drive when she was 10 years old. She always had a car. She had this wonderful Woody, and we would come down from Boston, and we would get all the way to Woods Hole, and we had the dog in the car. And whatever else she found that she wanted to bring to the island with 5 kids and food and clothes and a new sewing machine or whatever she wanted to bring. So we would get to Woods Hole and she would tell us to get under the blanket. And she would drive on the boat as one passenger in a car. And the dog Sheba would be under the blanket with us. You know, can you imagine? We survived because you had to and because it was important to Granny that we be under that blanket to get out. And then once we got on the boat and you could get out and just go upstairs and just breathe in the air and watch the sea, it was just wonderful.
Thanks to the Martha's Vineyard Museum for that clip of Jocelyn Coleman Walton, recorded by Lindsay Lee. You can hear the whole interview on the museum's YouTube channel. And we'll be back next week with another podcast from right here on the Vineyard. Our theme music is from island composer and musician Michael Hayden, and this week's podcast was edited by Margaret Evans. If you like our show, please follow On the Vineyard so you won't miss an episode. Thanks to our sponsor, Crane Appliance. Their experts listen to your needs and help you choose the right appliances for your home. Crane Appliance, they call the Cape and Islands home. I'm Louisa Hofstadter. Thanks for joining us on the Vineyard. We'll be back next week with another podcast, and you can catch up on past episodes anytime at vineyardgazette.com.